Today I'm going to take you through a tutorial on how to complete Lab 5. So this is the Module 5 Lab and we're working in Adobe Photoshop. To complete this tutorial you're going to need the project files in this zip folder, so you can go ahead and download those. And we're going to be working through this step by step together, so you may want to watch this video on your phone so that you can work on the computer and follow along. So first thing you want to do after you've downloaded the images is select all of them, and then we're going to open them with Photoshop. So as they're opening in Photoshop, they're going to open in 5 separate documents, and you'll see those in the tabs up here at the top. So we can toggle between the different images. And our finished image is going to look like this. So this is an example of what we're going to be making. This is a collage of 1, 2, 3, 4 different images with some different effects on it too. So I'm just going to scoot that one over here to the end, and these are the other 4 images we're going to be using. Okay, so these are the 5 different things that we need to include in our collage. So we need a semi-transparent layer for journey along with rotating the image. That's the text right here, wedding journey. We need an image of Harriet cut from the background. This is Harriet. And we're going to apply an outer glow to that layer. Then we need George's head cut out using a circle, and then we'll end up changing the background into a layer. Right now you can't see that because we're looking at just a JPEG, but if we were looking at a Photoshop document of this, it would look a lot different over here. So Photoshop can be used for a lot of different things. You can use it to directly edit images. So if you have an image like this that you wanted to restore, you can just work on that particular image. But today we're going to actually be combining images to make a collage. The first thing you want to do is go to File, New, and we're going to just start with a blank document. So over here in the settings, we want it to be a horizontal or landscape orientation, and we're going to go ahead and leave it at 7 by 5 inches. Background can stay white, and we'll just click Create. Okay, so this is our blank document. We need to add the background layer of the city of Farmington. So we're going to go to that JPEG first, Main Street, Farmington. To get this image over to our background, we're going to need to unlock our background layer. So you can see this little lock right here. We need to click on that. That unlocks the background layer. Really easy. And then we're going to use the first tool over here on our toolbar, the Move tool. The Move tool is one that you will use most often in Photoshop, and it allows you to move either a selection or a layer. So go ahead and click on the image now, and you can, there's several ways to do this, but you can click and drag it over to our untitled document, and then keep holding your mouse down this whole time. Move it to the center and release. Okay, so now we have our background image, but it is a little bit smaller than what we're looking for, so we need to resize it. So you're going to go up to Edit and Free Transform. The shortcut for that is Command T or Control T if you're on a PC. So this brings up the bounding box, which allows you to resize it. What you don't want to do is grab a corner and just start stretching without constraining it first. So you want to make sure that this little box is clicked, maintain aspect ratio. If it's unclicked, it lets you stretch the image. Or it should. Yeah. I don't know why it's doing that. Anyways, you want to make sure that you're not stretching it vertically or horizontally to where it looks skewed. So we're going to go ahead and size that image up to where it fits the whole page and click the check mark. So you have to click the check mark to commit your changes after you do anything with the free transform tool. Okay, so you'll notice over here once we dragged this image, it put it onto a new layer, and that's called layer 1. So you can double click on the name layer 1 and change that to Farmington and press enter. So this is our Farmington layer, and then we also have a background layer that's just white. We're not going to do anything with that right now. Alright, so since we are working on this, we're going to go ahead and save our untitled document as a PSD file. That's a Photoshop document, and that way if we run into any issues, we won't lose our work. So let's go File, Save As. And or you can just call this Module5Lab. And make sure that you save it in your folder that you created for Module 5. Now, our format for this is going to stay Photoshop. We will also need to, at the end, save it as a PDF, but for now we're just going to leave it as a Photoshop document. This is a working document that allows you to see all the layers, and it keeps all of the files for you. So you want to make sure that the layers box here is checked. This allows you to go back and edit it later. Okay, and then just click OK. Alright, so we're good. We're saved now. The next part that we're going to add is the journey, wedding journey. Okay, the next addition to our collage is going to be this wedding journey letter, and we're going to need to first go to the journey JPEG in Photoshop, and we're going to unlock the background layer, and then we're going to click on the layer with the move tool and drag it over to our document that we want it to be on. So the Module 5 Lab. Then go to the center and let go of it. So when you click and drag something like that, it automatically places it on a new layer. We're then going to use the Free Transform tool to size it and rotate it just a little bit. So we're going to go to Edit, Free Transform. That brings up your bounding box. And we just want to rotate it slightly to the left, maybe around 15 degrees. and then we can click in the center of it to move it. So we're going to move it down in this corner. Go ahead and click the check mark, and then let's look at the finished one. I think we need it to be a little bit bigger. Okay, so we're going to go back over here, make sure that you're on the wedding journey layer, and Control T or Command T. As you resize, hold down the Shift key, and that will keep it from skewing. Oops, I still have it skewing. Hold on. We need to make sure that this little button is locking our aspect ratio. There we go. And then let's go ahead and drag it down in the corner here. And then click the check mark. The other thing that is done on the finished copy is the opacity has been changed so that it looks a little bit see-through. So let's go back over here. The opacity of each layer can be found in your layers panel right here where it says opacity. So make sure you're on that layer. Let's go ahead and rename that to Wedding Journey so we don't get confused. And then we're going to change the opacity. So let's take that down, I would say around 60%. Okay. On this particular image, it looks like the paper is a pretty defined line compared to what's done on the final over here. So see how the edge of the paper isn't really showing very much? So we're going to go in with, we can use a few different tools here. If we want to be able to edit it again, we would need to use a layer mask. So I'm going to show you that way rather than just using the eraser tool. You could use the eraser tool and go in and just erase part of it, okay, with a blur. So we would change our hardness up here to 0. And so that's one way we can do it, is with the eraser tool. However, I prefer to use a non-destructive editing method instead of actually erasing those pixels, because that's what we've just done, is erase those pixels. So I'm going to go back to my history over here and click the previous step before I use the eraser tool. This saves 20 steps for you, so you can go back as far as 20 steps. Okay, so to make this still editable with a layer mask, I'm going to show you how to do that. So making sure you're on this layer again, you just want to click this button right here, new layer mask, or add layer mask. And it's going to add this little white box right next to your layer. That is a mask that's going to allow you to edit. Okay. So the next thing I need you to do is press the D key on your keyboard, which is going to set your colors to black and white. And then you want the black square to be forward. So you need to use the X key, or you can use this little arrow right here to make the black square in front. Okay. So now we're actually going to be working on this layer mask, and we're going to be painting black, which is going to take away, oh, I'm still on the eraser tool. Sorry, we have to go to the brush tool. Okay, and then on your brush you want to choose just like a general soft brush. Okay, so maybe soft, round. Your hardness should be at 0. The size, you can make about, I don't know, let's say around 200, 220. And then go along the edge of your paper again and just kind of mask the edges. So this isn't actually deleting those pixels, it's just letting certain pixels come through the mask and other pixels not. So our original stays the same. Okay, so that's kind of the point of using a mask. And you may want to kind of trim off this corner over here. And we'll just sort of cut down that corner too. Okay, so all we should be seeing here is pretty much the words and a little bit of the floral background. If you want to play with the opacity some more, you need to click on the actual layer, not the mask, and change that opacity. So if you want it to be a little bit less, where it's very subtle, you can do that. Okay. Alright, so now we are ready to cut out Harriet. Let's go File, Save, and just make sure we don't lose that. So let's go over to Harriet, and the lab says we need an image of Harriet cut out from the background. Okay, great. If I look at the finished lab, you can see that Harriet is cut out pretty well. So we're trying to get a pretty close line to her outline. So when you're trying to cut something out in Photoshop, there's several tools you can use. You have the quick selection tool, which is color-based. Also, the magic wand tool is color-based. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if I take the quick selection tool, you can use the bracket keys, square bracket keys on your keyboard to make your brush bigger or smaller. If I click, it's going to select all the pixels of that shade within a little bit of variation. So the lighter gray color, right? And if I click over here, it's going to do the same thing. Now notice the marching ants that are going around the selection. That is determining what is selected. Okay, so if I use the zoom tool, zoom in here, you can kind of see that this is a really rough edge here, and it didn't do a very good job of selecting her hair and around her ears. Like right here, it kind of just cut out a chunk of her ear, and it didn't get enough right in here. So sometimes the quick selection tool will work if you have a really defined contrast, like a stark white background. But in this case, it's gray, so it's not working super great. We do have good lines here along her coat, so because that's pretty good contrast. But around her face and stuff, it's not that great. So go ahead and deselect that. So the only way you can deselect is by using Control D or Command D on the Mac. Alright, so, or you can go to the select menu and deselect. Okay, so go ahead and deselect, and then let's try that same thing with the magic wand tool. So the magic wand tool is also color based, and you can set the tolerance to be different amounts of shades that it will select. So let's try that. Okay, so on mine the tolerance is 32, and it's just selecting the pixels of that particular shade. So the ones that are closer to her are darker, so that's not going to work for us. I'll do Command D again. Let's see what else we got here. We could use the lasso tool, which allows you to make freehand selections. So that might be a good option here because we can go along with our mouse, click and hold. Okay, but what happens if I'm not very good? Oops, I messed up. Okay, so then my selection just gets all wacky, so you have to be very controlled with the lasso tool. So let's deselect that. We also have the polygonal lasso tool, which should allow us to draw lines, straight lines. Okay, but what happens if we have a curve like on her face? Okay, she's going to end up looking really square, which is not ideal either. So double click and Command D or Control D. The magnetic lasso could be a good option here. It actually tries to follow the line that you follow with your mouse, and you don't have to hold your mouse down for this. So you just pick your point that you start and click, and then it follows the line for you. So if you're not really good at following lines, that's okay. This one's going to try and help you out. So actually, this one seems to be working pretty good. And you just want to take some time and be a little careful. But notice that if I get outside the line, the magnetic part of it still follows that line. So it's fixing most of my mistakes for me. Alright, so I'm going to keep going down the arm. And as far as her body goes, we don't need all of this. So I'm just going to kind of go across here and then back up the other side. But the main part that you need, you got to click right back where you started, and then that will finish it, okay? The main part that we need is her upper torso and head, okay? Alright, so now that we have that selection, we can cut her out of the background, but first we need to unlock our background layer. So go ahead and click the unlock button. And then we need our move tool. So change from your magnetic lasso to the move tool. And then we're going to move her over to our project that we're working on. And we'll drop her right here. Okay. So that looks pretty good. I mean, it did leave a little white section right here on her arm, but I'm not too worried about that since this is your first time trying Photoshop, and we're also going to hide her arm over here. So we're going to make her bigger. She's going to be almost the same height as the whole page, and then we're going to squish her over in the corner, okay? So let's try that. So you want to click on her. Let's rename the layer Harriet. Okay, and then we're going to use our free transform, so edit, free transform, or Command T, Control T, and we're going to make her, whoops, we want to constrain the aspect ratio, and then we're going to resize her, okay? So again, we only want really her upper torso, so we're going to end up making her pretty large compared to the rest of the picture. Okay, I feel like that looks pretty good. So we can go ahead and click the check mark when you get it where you want. Okay, so now Harriet looks like she's sitting on top or in the foreground of our picture. And we've cut her out. We're going to add a little bit of a glow to her. And you can make that glow whatever color you want. The student in this example used red. So let's go back to Harriet. And the way that you add a glow is you're going to go to the the FX menu. So that stands for effects, if you didn't get that. And then we're going to choose outer glow. And if you have the preview box checked, it's going to give you a preview of what you're doing. So you want to kind of be able to see that still. So outer glow starts out really light. So let's see if we can get it to where we can actually see it, what's going on. Okay, so we've got this white line around her. We need to change the spread. So that's going to make the line bigger, and the size is going to make the glow bigger. Okay. Now we don't want it to be too creepy, but we want it to look sort of like she's fading out into the background. So right now I'm going to just bring the opacity of that glow down, and it just sort of gives like an aura around her. You can try changing the color if you want. If you like the red, you can go with that. I actually like the glow to be pretty subtle, so I'm going to keep my opacity around 50%. Do what you think looks best. You can try blue. So whatever you like, it's up to you. I'm not going to grade you based on that. So if you think something looks good, you can try different blending modes too. You'll probably find that screen looks most like a glow though. If you want it really bright, you can try some of these other ones in this group of blending modes. So anyways, yeah, that's how you add an outer glow. Okay, so that's Harriet. She's pretty much done. And now we are ready to work on George. So let's go to George. Okay, so George is a different color. He's sepia, whereas Harriet was black and white. And George is actually pretty tall and would really just kind of overwhelm our picture if we put his whole photo in here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of cut out his face in an elliptical shape, and then we're going to fade him into the background as well. Okay? And I'll show you how to do that. So go to George. So to make an elliptical selection, you're going to go to the second tool down over here. Right now it's on rectangular, but if you click and hold, it will bring down a submenu where you can choose elliptical marquee tool. That's the one you want. And then up here in the settings, it has options for feathering. So I'll show you without feathering first, and then I'll show you with feathering, and you can see the difference. So we'll leave it at 0 first. And we'll select his face. If you don't get right in the center of his face, that's okay. You can hold down the space bar before you let go of your selection and just move it where you want. Okay, so just do an elliptical shape. And then what I want you to do is go over to unlock the background layer. And if we get the move tool and pick him up right now as it is, you can kind of see it's going to cut him out, and it's going to look like he was cut out, like he's in a picture frame, okay? So that is cutting out his head. It's not actually destroying the JPEG, believe it or not. So if I was to drag it over here and drop it and go back to my JPEG, George is still there. Okay, we didn't lose George. So that's good. That is one of the nice things about Photoshop, is that most things you do are not destructive completely. You can usually fix it. But we want to actually select him with a little bit of feathering, which creates a blur in the selection. So let's take our feathering up to, let's try 15 pixels. And then we'll get our move tool and cut him out and drag him over to our PSD and drop him. Okay, it doesn't look like the feathering worked. Hold on, let's go back. I think we have to redo our selection with feathering. So let's try that again. So do Command D or Control D to deselect. Now go back to your elliptical marquee tool. Make sure there's no marching ants. Change your feathering to 15 and try it again. You can hold down the space bar again if you need to. Okay, so now let's try the move tool. There we go. Now we've got some feathering. Okay, so see how it's got like a nice little blur into the background. It's not a hard line that's completely defined. We might actually want a little bit more blur than that. If you can see on this, I think they've gone around with the eraser tool or a mask tool and erase some of it, but I still think we need some more feathering. So let's go back and try it one more time. Let's just trash that layer. Go back to George. We have to do Command D to deselect. And let's try our feathering at 30 pixels. Then we'll get our move tool. There we go. So that looks a little bit more like a blur into the background, okay? We need to make George bigger, so we're going to do Edit Free Transform or Command T, Control T on Windows. And we don't want him to be skewed like this, so we're going to constrain the aspect ratio. Alright, I'm going to make him a little bit bigger here. Okay, and let's go look at the finished one, the placement. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We're going to erase or mask some of it around the edges still, okay? So we might want him just a tad bit bigger. Alright, George, you look nice. Okay, so we're going to go over here and change the name of George's layer to George. And then we're going to add a layer mask like we did with the letter. And you should still have black as your foreground color. You want to go to the brush tool or press the B key. And then make sure your brush is still hardness 0. And you can get a pretty good sized brush. If you want it even bigger, you can go up to like 400 or 500. And then we're just going to kind of take that brush around where we want to see the background. So I didn't want all of his tie in there, so I just went over that. And then I'm going to go kind of close to his head, okay? So again, you do your interpretation of this, be artistic with it, but I think that looks pretty good. So we have George, we have Harriet, we have the wedding journey, and we have the background. The only other thing we need to do is change the background into a layer. And that's really easy. We just double click on it and click OK. So we have a white layer behind everything. So go ahead and save this as a PSD. So you can just do Command S or Control S. And I do want you to just upload the PSD, and that way I can see all of your layers here. it's going to be a pretty big document, so if it's too big, what you can do, because see it's 46 megabytes just as it is now, but what you can do is file save as, and then change this to Photoshop PDF. That still lets me see the layers as long as you have this layers box checked, but it's not going to be as big of a file. So click save. Just click OK. You can put this on smallest file size. If you were going to print it, I would do the print one. And then check this preserve Photoshop editing capabilities, and that lets me look at your layers. Okay, and then click save. Yes. Alright, so you can upload the PSD or the PDF, either one, as your lab for today. Thanks for watching.